we'll probably do this for about 50 minutes. I normally make this like 30 minutes, but it's all it's all good. But hey, so first of all, I just want to say thanks for coming on, and I think we're going live now. So I'm just gonna double check that this is. Yeah, here we go. All right, cool. So I'm gonna mute this real quick. But it is muted. All right. Yeah. So yeah, again, man, thanks so much for jumping on. I'm gonna just say real quick, if you're watching online and you're kind of catching this conversation, I apologize. I didn't give you any heads up that we were doing this today, and so that's on me. But I've been doing a little bit of training with my new job, which is going well. And so today, actually, I'm having a conversation with our guest speaker for this weekend. His name is Logan Wolf, and Logan, tell us a little bit about who you are, your family, where you're at, your ministry, and yeah, just kind of let us know who you are.
Yeah, man, absolutely. My name's Logan Wolf. I am a church planter. I moved from North Carolina to Utah almost 10 years ago. This coming May will be 10 years. And we moved out here specifically because of the need for the gospel. So Utah is considered the least reached state in America, less than 2% Christian. The county I live in, Utah County, is the 8th least reached county in America. It's 0.5% Christian. And then even the metro where I live in, Provo, is the least reached metro in America. It's also 0.5% Christian. So it's a really needy area. And so I'm here. I've got my wife, Grayson. She's the principal of a charter school here in town. We've got 2 boys, Jacob and Benny. Jacob will turn 4 on October 2nd. Benny is almost 6 months old now. So just it's a lot going on here at the house. So
Yeah, man, I hear you. Like I was saying, right, I'm just kind of starting this training for a job, and we have 4 kids, and man, my wife's got our youngest one at home still. They're all 3 now in college.
They're all in college.
Yeah, second. But they're all in school now. But when the whole COVID thing initially kicked off, we found ourselves at home with 4 kids, and I was just so glad I was still working because I just
Yeah, I don't envy because my wife as a principal has been having to navigate the just constant changing with the COVID situation. So I don't envy her, but
yeah.
it's
Just for Bethany, So, hey, look, if you guys are jumping on, Logan's kind of introducing himself. If you have any questions for Logan, let him know. You can drop those in the comments. We'll kind of fill those a little bit towards the end of the call, and then if you would maybe just share this video as well. Obviously, spread the word and share it with your friends for this weekend at 10. One of the things that obviously we're talking about during kind of this series of people coming in kind of helping us with messages is this idea of discipleship. And it's kind of been cool because me and you have been doing I kind of quit on you. I haven't been there the past few weeks. But I started a new book, which it's been cool to hear some of the conversation coming out of that. But we went through a book called From Mega Church to Multiplication. And so I think definitely we're always thinking as church leaders, we're always thinking discipleship, but I think there's also corners you turn in that mission a little bit in your ministry. So I will get a little bit more on like stuff coming for the weekend, but I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about some maybe turns you've made, some corners you've rounded as you think about making disciples, being a church leader, leading discipleship, doing discipleship, experiencing discipleship.
That's a good question. I feel like there's been some definitely some clear steps that's happened over the last almost 10 years. The first one came pretty quickly, about a year or 2 in. I think we went through this phase, my wife and I, where we were examining what we believed, right? We moved in, so we are Christians in a city that's 98% Mormon. And so there was a lot of like, what's truly, and we grew up in the Bible Belt, right? So it was a huge culture thing and really traditional type churches that we grew up in, and traditional Bible college. And so there's really this like, okay, if I'm going to be rubbing shoulders with all of these Mormons, people that have a completely different worldview than I do, I don't want to be hung up on secondary and tertiary issues. Like what's the important stuff? And so there was a time where we kind of just sifted through that. things that, okay, is this truly a sin, or was this someone's preference preached as sin? Like, is this doctrine central to the faith, or is this something that you can have a different opinion on and not really, it's not. So there was a lot of that, which I think is healthy to go through that.
Yes.
And then we were basically that attractional type church, that traditional church. We did that for 5 years, at which point we absorbed another church. We went to multi-site. We did that for a few years. And I remember, and I'll talk about this over the weekend. I remember I was preaching through Acts. I like to preach verse by verse through whole books of the Bible. And I remember I named the series Upside Down, based on Acts 17:6, where Paul is drugged before the authorities and he's accused of turning the world upside down because of the message he's preaching. And I remember several weeks into preaching that, reading it again and just thinking, there's no way anyone would ever accuse us of turning the world upside down.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I know, and it was, it broke my heart. Like, no one would ever say, man, they're turning the world. And I realized, because we're not making a difference and impact outside of this Sunday gathering. Like, we're not making disciples who go out and live this radical, bold faith and, just believe Jesus and take him at his word, in every realm, every sphere of life. And so we began to reevaluate some things. So that was at that point, another phase was just not that realization, but we began to look at the methodology. Like, why aren't we making disciples? And we realized we were getting what we were set up to produce. I was bemoaning the fact that we had a bunch of spectators coming in and sitting and watching me. And I would say that, like, you guys are just a bunch of spectators. And then I'd say, okay, come back next Sunday and watch me, And so it was just like, so we actually went through some really drastic stuff as far as we want everyone to know how to share their faith. We want everyone to be in the word on their own. Like, you don't have to go through Pastor Logan to get to Jesus. You can do this. And begin to go that route. And then eventually, of course, we ended up selling our buildings. We had 2 buildings in 2 different cities. We sold those, and now we're a network of house churches. So
yeah,
crazy.
And yeah, that's great. It is interesting, how much we talk about releasing people for ministry. But as I think about it, a lot of the times, and there's nothing wrong with a greeting ministry and a kids ministry and a teen ministry. And I think all those things are super needed for certain types of presentation and gatherings. And there's nothing wrong with them, obviously, but that's really not ministry.
Right.
Ministry is sharing the word, bearing burdens through prayer, disciple making, and training others, equipping others to do the same. Whereas all these other things that really, and I know if you're watching this, you're probably thinking, this is American church heresy, right? Because sometimes we think that that's ministry, and it's not that those roles don't facilitate. It's just we do really need to understand that those are facilitators of programming, not really ministry. It's not, and not that there's not gifting that the Spirit that's taking place.
Well, and I think if we were to boil down to what Jesus says matters most, in fact, where's a notepad? I'll draw this for you. If we say, what does Jesus say matters most? You'd come to 2 passages. You'd come to Matthew 22, and you'd come to Matthew 28. And then Matthew 22, that's the great commandment, right? He says, what's the most important thing? Jesus says, love God, and he says, love others. And then you come to Matthew 28, and that's the Great Commission. That's go and make disciples. And so another thing he says that the last command is to make disciples. So if you could boil down what Jesus says is most important, loving God, loving others, making disciples.
Yeah.
So here's what happens, I think, a lot of times. We think, well, in order to do that, we actually need some programs. And so we begin to invent all these kind of extra things to help us do that. And we put programs in place. And then we think to ourselves, well, I don't just need programs. We actually need a place where those programs can take place, right? We actually need a facility. So now we need a building. And so we'll get ourselves a building. And then we think, wow, we've got all these great programs and we've got these buildings now, we actually need some staff. We need some people to run the programs and to take care of the facilities. And so we get some staff. And then what you realize when you get all those things is all of those cost a lot of money. And so you end up having to have this huge budget to facilitate all of this. And notice then, What you have here is look, the important stuff's in there, right? It's still there, but
Yeah.
now you've created this extra biblical structure around side of it or outside of it. And a lot of our time and our energy, and certainly our money, doesn't go to what's most important. It goes to maintaining the structure we created around it. And so that's, again, I'm not knocking any church. I'm telling you, that was one of the realizations I had. We weren't doing the important stuff. We were maintaining a structure that we had created.
Yeah.
And so I think that's always something that's
well, and here's the crazy thing, like, and I can really only speak to my church, but I think I could also say a lot of other churches are grappling with the loss of what you just described. And we are, I mean, we've not had a meeting location for 6 months, at least 6 months. We lost our most permanent facility in December. And so, and it is what it is, that's not,
right.
you can react to that however you choose to, but I will say it was clarifying, not in the same way, but we kind of found ourselves at a little bit of the same
well
point.
I think it's freeing when you don't have to feel like you're holding up this structure, because Jesus doesn't say go make these things. Jesus says go love God, love others, make disciples. And yet we spend so much. It's just, I think the word freeing is absolutely right. I remember when we got rid of our buildings, brother, I cannot tell you how well I slept that next night. Like, it was incredible. I was like, before, I was stressing over the bills and the maintenance, and the offerings weren't lining up with it, and I'm like an ulcer in my stomach. And when those was gone, I was like, thank God. We're just gonna go back to what's important. So
well, and I'm excited, because as you talk about this, and again, I haven't watched the message that you've sent over yet, but depending on how we talk about this, I think that what I am finding most exciting during this time is that we're seeing people reach without any of that stuff. And we're actually seeing people begin to come and listen to the Bible, study the Bible, want to know about the Bible. And I was expressing to you a little earlier, it's not as consistent maybe as you'd like it to be. But the point is, I guess for church leaders, it never is, one. More is never enough, right? I mean, but at the same time, it's still happening. Like, disciple making is still happening. I'm starting discipleship with a family literally this coming week, and so it's been great. And I think the American church in a lot of ways is really maybe realizing that same idea. Oh, I actually don't need all this stuff to manage. I can just be missionally focused. And I would say, especially for those of you that are watching or will watch this later, part of our church or ambiently connected to our church, this is great news. This is awesome news, because it's not like we have to get people to a certain place to make them a disciple or help them become a disciple. You can do that right where you're at. You can do that in your part of town. You can do that at your house. You can do that at a restaurant. You can do it anywhere and everywhere. And I think that's one of the beauties about this, kind of COVID-19 situation. My fear, especially, and I would say just for me, is that we try to get some semblance of going back to normal, because normal was not working. I don't think.
And I think there's a danger if that's our focus, is like one day we'll get back to that. I think we're missing and just an incredible opportunity to see the kingdom advance. But I was discussing with some church leaders on the front end of COVID, like 5 or 6 of us were getting together over Zoom and just reading different articles about ministry in the midst of the pandemic and stuff, and just trying to brainstorm. And one of the articles we read described the circumstances. You can look at the circumstances like a blizzard, this kind of one and done event that's going to be quickly over. You just got to stick it out. Like winter, a little longer season, but there's this hope of, spring's coming. This is going to be done. Or you can look at it like an ice age and like, hey, things may never go back to that. Like, things are completely different. And I think what you're seeing is, as you look around, is who's viewing it which way, right? And I think if you take this approach of, man, we're just going to get back to normal, you're not looking to innovate. You're not looking for new opportunities. You're not looking for, fresh relation, anything like that. You're just hanging on. At some point, I'm going to be back in my building behind the pulpit. People are going to sit there, come in and listen, and things will continue like usual. But I think there's a really good chance here, man. to move into neighborhood, like you said, it don't have to be like move into neighborhoods and restaurants and coffee shops and gyms and meet people where they're at and have a chance to equip people to go in those places and just live out their faith bold. And we're seeing that. I mean, this past summer, over a period of 6 weeks, we've seen 5, professions of faith and baptisms and that kind of stuff that, people were coming to faith at dining room tables and car. I mean, it's just different. It was awesome. And then to see them baptized in public pools and in backyards, and it was not tied to one geographic location. It was just happening organically throughout town. It was awesome. So.
Yeah, I love it. I think you put something, I'm not sure if it was earlier this week or actually today, where you talked about, let's not confuse, an invitation to church and sharing the gospel. And I love that thought. So we just finished up about a 6-week training with a couple of guys in our church about just sharing the gospel. And we use that 3 circles kind of approach as well. And it was great because, one, they understand how to do this, but part of that conversation was also just realizing, sharing the gospel and witnessing is not this salesman, thing that if you're convincing or compelling or, charismatic enough, people are just going to love your Jesus.
Right.
It's really just explaining the gospel, the fact that Christ lived the life we couldn't, he died the death we should have, and resurrected 3 days later. And really what people do with that, it's ultimately their choice. And so I think you put an emphasis on relationship and just like you said, right? Loving God, loving people through their doubt, through their skepticism, being faithful to tell them what it is. And then just wait for God to do what only he can do, which is create a thirst for him, draw him to himself, and create that work of sanctification. So that's exciting. So you have a couple stories, obviously, of people that have come into faith. We're talking about discipleship. So tell me a little bit, just give me a story, give me an example of someone following Christ. And we understand that's a little more all encompassing than someone just praying a prayer or deciding to follow Christ with their life. But just
I can give you just a couple of examples. So, I mean, when we were I'll give you an example of someone I'm just really excited about. When we were in the buildings, we had a family come join us and ended up, led them to Jesus, a lady. And they're now, this couple is now leading one of our house church gatherings. It's a Spanish gathering. They're leading it up in Taylorsville outside of Salt Lake City. And so I remember when we were in the buildings and she comes to faith, this has been a couple of years ago, right, prior to the transition. And I remember baptizing her, and this was just an exciting time. She's come to Jesus. And then just this summer, she actually shared the gospel with someone herself. And that person responds and repents of their sin, trusts Jesus, their Savior. And then she called me and she's like, look, so-and-so has come to Jesus, and I've told her, about baptism, and she wants to be baptized. And I remember in that conversation, she could tell she was nervous. And I said, well, just tell me when. I said, I can come up there. And then I immediately I said, you know what? Let's just talk about it right now on the phone. How about that? And because I was thinking in my head, you know what? I didn't lead that lady to Jesus. I don't need to be up. She did this. She needs to lead this. And so we talked through what baptism is and isn't, and I answered some of her questions about the practical side of it, suggested some passages she may want to read or whatever. And then late that next day, she just sent me a picture that this woman that she had led to Jesus, she baptized in her backyard herself. And so she's basically fulfilling the Great Commission, right? Because the Great Commission given to the apostles was go make disciples, baptize them, and teach them to obey everything I've commanded you. Well, what's the last thing Jesus commanded the apostles to do? Make disciples and baptize. So you see the responsibility is that doesn't fall to one, like the pastor or anything, that goes to everybody. And so actually to see that played out has been incredible. In fact, I mentioned we had 5 baptisms this summer. I only conducted one of them.
Nice.
So I mean, it was just insane. So we have men and women, just people they've led to Jesus doing that. So that's just what I'm really excited about, because I remember baptizing that lady, and then she leads someone to Jesus and does the same thing. So
yeah, man, that is awesome. That is awesome.
Cool.
So typically when I'm preaching, I'm trying to think through a couple things, like what do I want them to think, feel, do.
Yeah.
And so I kind of want to ask you before we kind of let off today, this message, people are going to listen to it, they're going to hear it. And obviously there's going to be some, I preaching, right, is a little bit like a buffet. Like I used to think that it was like, I just served you steak, and so you're going to really want steak. But what I realized is I've kind of matured and grown a little bit. I realized actually, I might think I'm serving steak, but it's actually a couple buffet options, and people are just kind of, they're picking out what they want. But I do think it's always helpful, to clarify your point and where you're going. And
Yeah.
so maybe you have something in your brain, as people are listening to this, as they hear this message, this is what I would love for them to like take away. This is what I would love for them to really leave thinking about or deciding.
No, I think that's a good question. In fact, I would go ahead and one thing I think anyone could do in preparation for this weekend is just to spend some time reading and meditating on 2 Corinthians 5:17-21. I'm gonna read a lot of different passages during this message just because I'm gonna be sharing some stories and some of my thought process that we took our church through. But we're gonna end there in that passage. And I think that's really the crux of the whole message as it moves to that climax. And it's I want people to recognize that making disciples isn't something for like this upper elite group of Christians. It's actually part of our identity. Like everyone is tasked with this and can do it, right? This is our identity in Jesus. And so that means it's something we can do, and the Holy Spirit's going to empower us to do, and we get to do together and learn together collectively. And so I would love for people to come away with the understanding of, hey, this is for me. Like this is for me today, right now. So that would be, I think, a huge win if we could just begin to see that shift in thinking of the Great Commission's an option to actually making disciples is part of my faith.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's for us in the sense of, like we were talking a little bit before, in the sense of mission, identity, and accessibility.
Right.
And I think that third one is where we lose a lot of people. They understand it's my mission. They may even agree with you that, this is what God's made me to be for him. But the accessibility of it, I don't really know if I can do that, in my neighborhood or at my job or whatever. And so that's exciting.
Well, that's why I'm excited that you're having this conversation about discipleship over these several weeks, because you're hitting it from all angles. In fact, I read a study, I think it might have been Barna, that 64% of Christians think the Great Commission is an option, like optional. 64%. And it goes back, and I think you're losing them. You just laid out three. I think they're falling through those cracks, right?
Yes.
So I think this is I certainly think this is an important topic, an important discussion. And because I'm thrilled that you're several weeks into it. So.
Yeah, no, it's been really great. And man, it's been challenging me. I'd love to say that I'm always, I think as a pastor and a church leader, you're always thinking about, the Great Commission, making disciples. But I think if we're both being honest, practically, that accessibility component, I can fall through that constantly, where I can jam pack my schedule with ministry planning or thinking, and then I'm not actually taking time to walk across the street or getting into a neighborhood or a public place and actually having a gospel conversation with people. So, so it's been helpful for me as well.
Good, man.
Well, look, man, I appreciate you giving me a couple minutes here. As usual, we have 0 questions.
I'm just going to take that as I was so clear in everything that I said. People are just like, he just hit it. So
yeah, you know what? Actually, I can see that from your perspective now, and I'm just going to go ahead and congratulate us. Great job, Isaac and Logan. Yeah, I mean, let's slow clap. We've explained the intricacies of discipleship so well. There were no questions.
There's no questions.
Hey, but guys, I appreciate you jumping on at whatever point, maybe later today or a little bit later tomorrow. Either way, I would like to say maybe share this video with some people. We're going to be live at 10 a.m. on Sunday. We'll be here on Facebook, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube on Sunday morning. So go ahead and send out invitations, encourage people to come. And like Pastor Logan said, let's take some time and be meditating on 2 Corinthians 5:17-21. Great passage, one of my favorite passages in Scripture. Just love how Paul addresses that church with a lot of things they had going on. And so come prayed up, meditated up, and ready on Sunday, and we'll see you then. Logan, I'm gonna take us off live here real quick, and then we can wrap up off here.
Right on.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.